All right, so good to meet all of you. My name is Travis Kalanick, co-founder CEO of Uber. Launched in June 2010, so we're just over 2 years old. We don't own cars. We don't employ drivers. A lot of people don't know that about us. They think we have all these assets. They think that we employ lots of drivers. We don't. We have 120 employees, most of which are not in San Francisco. We don't have a marketing spend.
You did angel investing, right?
Because
you were
I was burned out. I did 10 years of P2P. I was toast.
Yeah. What was the founding of Uber?
Okay, so...
Tell me that story.
So, good...
Because I think this is your billion-dollar company, I'll be totally honest. I'm an angel investor, so I'm kind of biased, but...
I mean, I agree with you.
Yeah, I think it's a billion-dollar company.
So let's see. So Garrett Camp, CEO
Sure.
StumbleUpon, and myself, like basically we were between gigs. He was still working at eBay because they had acquired StumbleUpon.
Yeah.
He hadn't
and by
spun it
working,
out.
you mean
Doing
getting
nothing.
a salary?
Yeah.
And doing nothing. Yeah.
I had just left Akamai.
Right.
And we were sort of talking about ideas. What are we going to do next?
Yeah, riffing.
We were at Le Web in Paris.
Sure.
Every Le Web, I rent, a large apartment, like 4 bedrooms, and just have friends stay.
Sure.
Right. So we were just hanging out in Paris for several days. Had a bunch of friends there, and we're riffing on ideas.
Right.
Into the late night, like every night, and it was all sort of lifestyle type ideas.
Right.
And his was like, and we're in San Francisco. He's like, it's hard to get a freaking taxi. Like, it's hard to get a taxi in San Francisco.
Impossible.
You're stranded. Game over.
Yeah, it's not New York.
And he's like, why don't we just buy a few limos, hire a few drivers, and, have a little iPhone app where we can just push a button and a car appears in 5 minutes.
Great idea.
And, oh yeah, we'd of course have to have a parking garage too.
When we first started, actually, it wasn't about taking over the world. It wasn't about taking on corruption in every city around the world. It was actually just about being baller in San Francisco. And the only way to do it, the original idea was, let's go buy 10 S-classes, let's hire 20 drivers, and let's get a parking garage. And I'm like, Garrett, we're not buying any cars, dude. And we're not signing any lease on a parking garage. But the idea of pushing a button and getting a ride in within minutes was a magical one. And at the beginning, it was a lifestyle thing. It was S-classes for us and our 100 friends. And so that's where it started. In order to use the app, anybody could download it, but in order to use it, you had to have a special code that I gave you. And pretty soon the inbox was just getting full of people who wanted the code because our friends were telling their friends, and then a Friday night, very soon after we launched, maybe a few weeks or something like that, we had 4 trips going on at the same time. We were going nuts. We're like, so when you do something successful, not everybody's happy. And the older the industry, the more protected it is by government or by corruption or by both, the more they're going to be upset about what you do. So a few metrics. Look, when I'm having a bad day, I just go to our overall revenue graph. When we first launched, first of all, a lot of people go, wow, it's successful, it's so obvious. I call it the hand to the palm to forehead moment when they learn about Uber. They're like, I had this idea, or I should have had this idea. When we first launched, guys, it wasn't easy getting our angel round. People thought we were crazy. Limos in San Francisco? What? But it took off, like I said, and so one of the interesting things before we went to our Series A, or sorry, this is actually before our Series B here, which we did in November of last year, was, is this a one-hit wonder or not? And this was like sort of the first 100 days. But what we found is that every city we were rolling out, we were just, hey, we didn't know if it was going to work.
So it started out as like, let's do this lifestyle business.
It was basically like, let's share a driver.
Yeah.
It was like a jet share. Timeshare for drivers.
And I'm like,
it's a genius idea.
He calls me at some point, like we'd been riffing on this for a while. He calls me, he's like, Travis, I've got the papers for the parking garage. I'm like, don't do it. Don't do it, because I was just very against owning the assets, hiring the drivers.
Right.
Parking garage. What I like to say is that Uber is very classy and it's very efficient.
Right.
Garrett brings the classy and elegance, like that's his part of it.
Yeah.
I bring the efficient.
The value.
I bring the gnarly math efficiency sort of aspect to the business.
Well, and the business is what?
The business is on-demand town car service. Like I push a button on my iPhone or Android or even SMS. I push a button, and in 5 minutes a car appears. I can see it coming to me. When it arrives, I get buzzed. Uber has
so on the map, it shows you
a car coming to you.
A car coming to you on a Google map, basically.
Yep.
And it tells you how many minutes, the driver's name, and my billing information is already in there.
Yep.
And my phone number's in there, so I can text with the driver
and
along the way.
And we put iPhones in all the cars, so we see the exact route it was taken. When you get to your destination, you just walk out of the car.
You don't have to pay anything. You don't have to worry about tipping. It's all included.
It's all included.
And the price is double the cost of a Lincoln Town Car?
No,
50% more for all that convenience?
No, it's twice the price. In San Francisco, it's twice the price of a taxi. In New York, it's 1.75. In Seattle, it's 1.5.
So it's cheaper than a Lincoln Town Car normally is, even though you're getting all that convenience.
It's 90% cheaper than a Lincoln Town Car. But you get a Lincoln Town Car.
But shouldn't it be more expensive for all that convenience? Why is it not more expensive to get that? Because I would pay more for that service.
Totally.
Than you would pay for a normal carrier or music
If we only wanted to deal with wildly successful entrepreneurs, then you're right, we would charge more. But the point is we want to have more Ubers in a city than there are taxis. We are going to dominate every city that we go into. And so you have to find the right price point to make that happen.
Every city we were rolling out got progressively better. Our operations side of the house got very efficient, and then the technology and the number of people who knew about us when we go in. We went into New York, we had 1,000 people with credit cards on file without a car on the ground. So this wasn't a one-hit wonder, and so we just started launching a ton of cities. And we have this double rainbow of metrics. What does it mean? Remember, as liquidity goes up, this is, people in the marketplace who are building a marketplace know what liquidity means. It means demand and supply go up together. In our world, as liquidity goes up, the quality of the experience goes up, and it dramatically, right? So our average pickup times in San Francisco are 2 minutes and 45 seconds. When we first started in New York, we were like 12-minute average pickup times, and let me tell you, you don't want to be delivering 12-minute pickup times to New Yorkers. So as it gets better, now we're right around 5 minutes in New York, and that's kind of when they lose their minds. As more people use it, you go from the core user base to bigger, the engagement actually gets deeper. The number of rides per rider per month actually go up as we expand. Right? The bottom line is that 50% of the people who've ever used still use, and we've seen that from the beginning. We indexed San Francisco revenue from last year, July 1st through the end of the year, and looked at this year, July 1st to where we are now, and it's tracking almost identical. So it's not slowing down anytime soon, and when you're talking about, for a particular city, 20% month over month, it grows. That's really big growth, especially when the numbers are getting big. So on the operations side, I think a lot of us are techies. I'm an engineer by training. We know what product managers are. We know what that means. But when you're on the ground, when your technology touches people and it touches cities, what you have to do is have process managers. Process managers are similar to product managers. They manage the process that people do versus machines. And the roadmap for product has to dovetail with the roadmap for process, because anytime we change anything that happens in a car, that's got to change the tech and vice versa. So there's really interesting road mapping processes that we go through. We're rolling out very big in Europe right now, so getting the operational expertise, and I think this just isn't talked a lot about in startups, is the operations side of the business. I think a lot of e-commerce companies see that. We see it on a very deep level because the rubber is actually meeting the road. But getting teams ready to roll out in Europe is something we've been spending time. We're in Paris and London right now. Like I said, we're going to be in Amsterdam very soon. And there's a whole host of other cities that are lined up in Europe, and that's going to be a big push end of this year all the way into the first half of next year. We have somebody in Asia ready to go, and Sydney's sort of our first city in Asia Pac. And I can't wait to go to the launch party. Quality and choice, it was really interesting, right? We had this high-end thing. It costs about 50% more than a cab. And everybody said, oh, it's high-end. And everybody goes, wow, I'm going to do a low-cost Uber. There's like a few that decide they're going to be a low-cost Uber, and they clone our app. They flatter us by basically stealing all the pixels and copying them over to their app. Uber, FYI, Uber is going to be the low-cost Uber. But it's about quality and choice. And what we see when we roll out a low-cost option, what we see is that actually engagement gets deeper because people have choice. They don't have to always get the expensive thing. So they start using it more often. People who maybe wouldn't start with the black car product start with taxi or what we call UberX. And then it's date night, and they want to they want to impress their lady, or they just need a comfortable ride. And it goes from there. So this was, well, choice is a beautiful thing. Let's keep moving. Taxi we did in Chicago in April. We now have a few cities. We're in Boston, Toronto, Chicago, San Francisco. We were in New York, but we're not anymore. Don't get me started. We did UberX, which is sort of like a low-end Uber, and we did this in July in San Francisco and New York, and that's where it's basically 30% cheaper, all hybrid fleet. At least in SF, we're starting to diversify a little bit out of hybrids because we can't get the partners to buy cars fast enough. But the thing is you push a button and a car appears in 5 minutes, and that feels magical. But how you make that happen is actually very complex. So we have a math department here. I like to tell them, I say, look, guys, you're in charge of our margins, right? Because they need to get the pickup times really low, but the utilization really high. How do you do that, right? Well, you do that through a lot of math, but we have 2 nuclear physicists on staff, a computational neuroscientist, a machine learning expert, and a few other guys. They're killing it. Demand prediction, congestion prediction, supply matching, supply positioning, smart dispatch algorithms, dynamic pricing. Friday and Saturday night are special nights. We sometimes get really big waves of demand that you can't really get enough cars to do anything about, so you have a marketplace-oriented sort of dynamic pricing element that clears the market. It gets more cars on the road and sort of lassos in sort of uncontrollable demand. All right, so supply positioning, right? We have a heat map of demand, but basically we're predicting demand 20 minutes ahead of time. The problem is that if I gave the heat map to drivers, right, they'll all go to the same spot, and then that'll be bad for a lot of people who aren't in that hotspot. So what we do is we say, here's the heat map of demand, our prediction for 20 minutes ahead of time. But where is the supply right now? That's anti-heat. That sucks the heat out of the map. What's left over is residual heat, underserved demand, and we do that on a neighborhood-by-neighborhood basis. We'll ultimately go continuous on it. The math is very tricky and complex and computationally intensive, but that gives you a sense of some of the things we do. That's in car. You don't see it because once you get in the car, he's on trip and he doesn't see that map anymore. Clearly, we have to look at events in the city because that affects demand in a big way. When the Giants play, of course, demand is huge. When the Giants win, it's much huger than when they lose. People want to go out in style, you know? They want to go to the bars, they're just feeling good. Actually, what's interesting is in Boston, when they lose, when the Red Sox lose, we actually have bigger demand. No joke. Here's what's really interesting. It's not enough to make money yet, but basically that huge uptick in demand when the San Francisco Giants win starts about 3 hours before the game begins. Okay, so I'm going to really speed through here, and this sucks because there's so much cool regulatory stuff I could have talked about. But giving riders high fives. Look, transportation is thought of as a boring space. It's boring. Well, until you push a button and a car magically appears. But we basically have lots of people who love us, and how do we get them to tell that story over and over again? Give them an excuse to tell the Uber story. So we do a lot of creative things. I think a lot of you guys have seen that.
Now, the drivers, it used to be called UberCab, but now it's just Uber.com, to be clear.
It's just Uber,
You showed me this, and the first thing I said to you was, are you raising money for this? I have to angel invest in this. And then, so you wind up getting a bunch of investors.
Top-tier angel investors.
Like live
give us some names.
At that event.
At the event.
I think
every
single 4 people at the event.
Everybody wanted in. Not everybody got in.
But
Yeah.
I mean,
I think you're the only one at the event that got in.
Yeah,
Actually, no, there's a first-round capital guy there.
Yeah, first round was there, yeah.
Though I ultimately ended up working with Rob Hayes from first round, but they did get in.
Yeah,
so it was
that's great.
you and first round.
Yeah. So who are the other angels in it?
Oh, man. So Alfred Lin, CEO of Zappos.
Wow.
Sean Fanning.
Awesome.
Man, I'm going to forget because there's so many awesome
but now
people.
you are
Mitch Kapoor. I mean, the list goes on.
You're at the point in your career where if you come up with a decent idea, forget about a great idea like this, but a decent idea. You have a line of people ready to invest, isn't it true?
When you are a successful entrepreneur, you can get your first round of investment fairly easily.
And by fairly easily, it's done. I mean, you just meet with somebody and say, here's what I'm doing, and they'll send a check.
Yeah, and you also have people you've already made money.
Right. And so how do you know,
Like Mark wanted in, but we know how Mark rolls.
He likes a little bit of discount.
He likes a deal.
He might, well, you know.
He likes a real deal.
So give him a deal.
And I have no issue with that, but he, you know, but yeah.
Yeah, you're negotiating and then, well, listen, he's got a certain thing. He wants a good deal. And,
no, I respect it. Like, we have PhDs. We have a computational neuroscientist, a rocket scientist, a nuclear physicist, like crunching numbers so that when you push the button, the car is right frickin' next to you because we knew you were going to push it.
Wow.
Or somebody was.
Yeah, precognition.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of doing the math, taking the market you have, and then once you have San Francisco and you have that driver, there's no reason that driver couldn't do an errand for you.
Or, you know, maybe not that driver in particular.
But maybe somebody on a scooter.
You know, again, when we price discriminate, we have all different types of cars and different kinds of fleets.
Yes.
Like, again, once you have that liquidity, and once you have that,
once you have, and by liquidity, I mean you have the Uber app on my phone, and I know how to press it.
And we have access to the supply.
A very interesting engagement figure, 50% of all the people who have ever ridden on Uber have ridden in the last 30 days. And remember, when you ride, you're paying. So think about commerce. Think about a commerce site or a commerce app where 50% of the people who've ever paid in the last 30 days. Average person is paying about $105 a month. In San Francisco, it's a bit higher than that. We're doing 26% month-over-month growth. That's an average over the last now 16, 17 months. You go, okay, well, if you start really low, then you can grow really big. But we were pretty big 12 months ago, and if you do 26% month-over-month growth, that means in 12 months, you're 16 times bigger than you were 12 months ago. So we're growing fast, and in fact, September over August was 29% month-over-month.